Gangsta was one of the most requested topics I've ever seen in my comments section. When Black Lagoon took off on the channel somewhere around about a year ago now, it started to pop up, mentioned as a similar anime for fans desperate for more of the gritty depth of Roanapur. I understand why people draw the comparison. They each follow the story of a middleman company performing legally dubious jobs for the ruling families of a damn city where you're really lucky just to be alive. Aptly described as dens of sin, these cities are full of brothels, sleazy bars, and you get to fall asleep to the wonderful white noise of gunshots. Safe to say the casts are part of that noise at times. Okay, a lot of the time. They're trusted as reliable backup in almost any situation, so it's only natural. And with a beautifully stylized realism, there's a hefty dose of blood and gore over a handful of insane one versus army sequences. I see why people draw this comparison because I was just describing both anime at once. You can apply that spiel to either one and it fits. But those were all surface level details. The gunfire and gore are a big part of both series, but to boil them down to these aspects alone is a disservice to what makes each one great. Well, what makes one of them great at least. I've spoken with many of you in the comments or elsewhere about why I came to love Black Lagoon, but I never put some of that into a dedicated video because it was hard to put it into perspective. But Gangsta offered me what was lacking, an anime with similar framing and almost none of the depth. Now, I'll start things off by saying I'm a little bit biased. There's reasons for me to keep talking about Black Lagoon, not just because it became a personal favorite, but because it's the largest draw to the channel. The more I praise it, the better my analytics will do. So I'm not some fully unbiased entity here, but rest assured I won't be praising it just because most of you love it. Hell, it seems a good few of you like Gangsta, and I'll be doing the opposite here, so I have no aversion to going against my own grain. And I guess in a similar sense, I will be doing that here with Black Lagoon as well, because it's common for anime to have a few different camps of fans. Psychopaths, for example, has those who love the steady drip of philosophy, those who love the rivalry, the cyberpunk style, the detective framing, or all of it. These are all equally valid reasons to love it as an anime. I don't have any personal aversion to or against cyberpunk or detectives, so those don't play into the equation for me, just as others don't care for trash talk based around Pascal. With Black Lagoon, it's the same. Sure, it has Revy kicking ass and, well, I was gonna say taking names, but there's really not much name-taking going on. Or Balalaika being a badass, or Roberta a literal fucking Terminator. But that isn't why I love the anime. I'm more like Rock. I genuinely dislike firearms in all their incarnations. It's not about the city of the dead that is Roanapur, or how it's full of women who could either rock your world or destroy it entirely. It's not about killing an entire ship of Nazis or blowing up actual boatloads of enemies. It's about why all of these things happen, or why these kinds of people exist. Revy blasting her way through a warship of human scum on its own is meaningless, but this is probably one of the most important episodes of the anime because of what it does for her character. This slaughter isn't about the fact that she was paid to do this. It isn't because they're Nazis and she finds them disgusting. It's because this new man from a nice, cushy life who's done nothing but cause her trouble just tried to lecture her about morality and the value of objects and memories. She has no objects like those medals. She never has, and if they did, they were stolen from her or sold just to stay alive. Her memories have no positivity, they're all about neglect and abuse. But here's Rock working up a picturesque, or to be true to the series, picaresque, little story where even Nazis have loving families at home who should be able to have the wonderful memories of their family's honor. But a girl from New York just trying to survive has nothing. And this kind of framing and thought is exactly what would have gotten her killed time and time again, yet here he is doing it naturally and he's better off than most have been. And only because she's protecting him, on his own this city would eat him alive. And then he was able to choose to enter their world, but has none of the respect for its power that can only be gained through pain and suffering within it. Over the course of a couple episodes, that conflict is the prevailing feeling that emerges from the miniature arc. It builds off of the introduction before it. Episodes 1 and 2 bring Rock into their world, build a tension between him and Revy based on their backgrounds, and then show Revy's lust for combat. Then the series progresses and we see the results of Rock being brought into their world and just how unfit he is for it and how much he'll have to adapt. We see what their tension grows into, moving from the backgrounds to the ideologies that formed from their upbringings, And then how the growth of these elements detracts from Revy's enjoyment of combat, killing with a complete lack of the flair we've seen so far. This isn't about loving what she does in some sick way, this is about only knowing how to do this, so she had to love it. Nothing in the anime is pointless or just because it looked or sounded cool. It all leads somewhere, like how those elements then swap between Rock and Revy as he begins to sink and she begins to float. I could go on for forever about how much grows from these points until the end of time, or any number of them in the series. Balalaika's ruthlessness, Chang's coy manipulation, Garcia's purity, but doing that would only cover part of the topic at hand today, because we have to look at what happens when you get that formula wrong. There's a heavy set of quotes around formula there, because at the end of the day, there is no simple formula for Black Lagoon. There's a reason many series lack the same level of depth, especially when they get into blood and gore. You can even see this a little bit in Black Lagoon itself. While the episodes Greenback Jane, Roanapur Freak Show Circus, and Mr. Benny's Good Fortune may give us a whole host of interesting, funny, or downright batshit crazy characters, they're easily some of the least impactful episodes of the anime all around. Greenback Jane is 22 minutes of Revy and some side characters who are just beginning their development, and then a whole host more who will be gone after 2 episodes. Roanapur Freak Show Circus brings Rock back into the mix, but the slower moments in between the usual action lack the importance of past episodes, like the already mentioned Moonlit Hunting Grounds, or even quite forgettable episodes like Gorillas in the Jungle. There, in those episodes, things are halted to address the characters and their relationships, adding more reason to future interactions. Here, things are halted for mostly planning, references, or quick jokes. This is almost highlighted by the end of the episode, where Rock can only repeat "I'm trying" and has no plan. Except rather than failing like he does before, he and the crew get plot armored out of a tough situation. And then Mr. Benny's Good Fortune is mostly the aftermath of the prior episodes, some kick-ass action, and the start of Edda's arc in the background. There's a few episodes you can remove without technically changing the series, like Ring Ding Ship Chase or the pair of Lock and Load Revolution and Gorillas in the Jungle, but despite lacking a change in the story, they still add necessary detail for character development, like Balalaika's dealing with of Mr. Chin, Revy's continued skills for an enjoyment of combat, and Rock having to encounter his own weaknesses in the most direct way yet. You can take all 3 of the Greenback Jane arc out of the anime, and you only lose the start of Edda's arc. It actually does a lot for her, showing directly how she views people as investments, a fitting tactic for a ruthless CIA operative. But combined with random characters, direct dictation of plot elements, and lack of importance narratively for the main cast, and the good they do is overshadowed by surface detail and forced memorability. I remember almost nothing about Rock or Revy from these episodes. It's kind of like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction. There's no reason for it to be there, but there they fucking are, because you will never fucking forget that scene because there's a literal fucking Gimp. And with Black Lagoon, yes, look, I get it. Most of us lived through the emo phase, so yes, of course I love Sawyer, we all do. But she and Shenhua and Kicked in the Nuts Wizard Man aren't actually adding anything of substance. These are the problems that start to plague Gangsta after a few good episodes. At first, I thought I was going to be in love. It took the time to show sign language for a deaf character and built what that condition meant into him, and it wasn't afraid to show a terrible world with terrible people and terribly dark thoughts. You have 2 people from wildly different walks of life, but who engage in the same demonized activity to support themselves. And one of those characters has a kinship with the third lead because they're each managing conditions through medication and the ups and downs that come from it. You have middlemen in a world of crime who go from subtle signs of kindness to outright torture in a single episode. There were so many positives, and I think the baseline is comparable to Black Lagoon. They just never did anything worthwhile with it. And I know it's not complete, and I'm sure the manga did it better, but we could look at just season 1 of Black Lagoon and I'd be saying the same things, and to be honest, I don't care about manga when I'm talking about anime. That's why I said anime. What I care about is a good story, and Gangsta's is a tale of a great start bogged down by, well, everything. I think the most fitting thing I can point to is episode 11. And actually, while double checking myself here, I think I can actually point to the episode list to prove my point. You can actually see where they gave up on it.
You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
But anyway, back to the point is what I would be saying if I'm not about to go the fuck off script. And editing me in the future, don't even put clips here, because with what I'm about to say, with how the anime treats itself, I'm not gonna give it screen time, because we're talking about screen time. In episode 11, they have a combined 1 minute and 10 seconds of any of the main characters, and that's counting Alex as a main character. And if we don't count Alex as a main character, there's 0 seconds. 0 seconds of screen time for the main characters. Worick and Nico are not shown once. They are not shown once in episode 11. It is just 1 minute and 10 seconds of Alex. It's all about side characters who we were just introduced to. Or not just introduced to, but they just started being relevant. With a couple episodes left, it's handled so terribly. I could probably freak out for 10 minutes about this one episode and how a climactic episode feels meaningless because it's following a meaningless side character. Oh. Anyway, back to future me who is on script. Just, no more of this. This is the Roanapur freak show circus of GANGSTA, and it's indicative of everything that went wrong with the anime. Now, I didn't think this is something that ever needed to be said, but not including your main characters in a climactic episode is quite the mistake, but that's just one of the examples. Most of these second half episodes of GANGSTA feature new additions rather than doing anything with the cast who was already there. It's like if every episode of Black Lagoon had the Roanapur freak show circus cast. GANGSTA slowly grows its cast to a bloated size where the main characters don't even matter. They become specks in a way too large world. But this on its own doesn't have to be bad. Technically, Rock feels as inconsequential as GANGSTA's cast at many points, and I'm saying it works for Black Lagoon. And that's why I said earlier, when you get the formula wrong. Because there's a difference in your characters not having an impact on the world, and your characters failing to have an impact on the world that centers around their story and their relatability. These ideas are present in the framing of both anime. Since they center around middlemen who often serve untouchably powerful families, there are moments where they feel unimportant or unconsequential. In the Fujiyama Gangsta Paradise arc, you could remove Rock from it entirely and things wouldn't really change here. As Balalaika reveals, she was planning on causing chaos anyway. All Rock did was give her an excuse to be more sadistic about it. And we kind of already knew this as things were progressing, even though we root for Rock as the most relatable character. Balalaika's strength and lack of shit-taking had already been developed. Did it seem like she would back down because of the words of a lowly businessman touting the ideals that were used to ruin her life? So really, he has no purpose here except to be broken. In GANGSTA, there's a similar feeling. Nico and Worick are exceptionally powerful, but they're running packages or painting a friend's shop or working the sheets. The four families control things here, and meetings where the main cast is absent, same as Black Lagoon. Sure, they annoy the cops, but they also work with them when needed. Outside of very individual situations like Dr. Theo, they're also not having an impact that couldn't be provided by someone else. This world is fucked, and that gives some credence to Nico saying it won't matter in reference to any effort to change things. So there's some benefit to this feeling, but it missed what made that feeling work in Black Lagoon. Rock is inconsequential in Black Lagoon no matter what he does because that's the purpose of his character. That's all he's about. From his origins as a low-level grunt in the professional world to the same role in Roanapur, he gets pushed around, and even when he gives it his all, there's a greater force that maintains the status quo. This is man versus society boiled down to its darkest, most poignant points, for lack of a better word, since I just went entirely off the script there. No matter where he goes, this is the case. And that's the setup of Black Lagoon's message about the power or powerlessness of the individual. We're forced to compare Rock to characters like Revy and ponder which one has more purpose, the man who fails in seeking something greater, or the woman who succeeds in stamping out that feeling for her others and for herself. Or the neutral parties like I just made the Dutch Benny ship. Or the neutral parties like Dutch and Benny, who are perfectly happy but only ever go with the flow. Are Rock and Revy even right to try and define purposes outside of their means? It's a commentary on power, both physical and societal. And because Rock comes from the most relatable background, it's crushing to see him fail so constantly. Each time he steps it up, from Garcia to the twins to Yukio and then the entire city, and it never works. We know how far behind he is in this race, but it's hard not to root for his success against all odds. Especially when we see moments like this that show the danger people like him, people like us, face in their world. GANGSTA misses this mark because it doesn't have the guts to actually make its characters relatable failures or pointless power holders. When Nico and Worick start off as mysterious mercs with hints of kindness, it's intriguing. They save Alex, but do they really, and why? They're gleeful at the opportunity to commit a bloody murder. This is a similar setup where they seem to recognize a level of powerlessness. It's like Revy enjoying a good shootout because it's a moment of power and a moment of purpose. They're just dudes killing as a way of life, except they don't stay that way. As we get more background on Tags and Twilights, Nico shifts from being a powerful character despite his disability to another face in the sea of discrimination. His story is a tragic one. His father killed his mother and raised him to be sold into slavery. He can't read or hear or speak until the first person ever shows him kindness for the first time. And to repay that kindness, he kills his only friend's abusive father and entire family alike. That friend is Worick, who goes from a rich child to a mercenary prostitute, working with the same man that slaughtered his entire family. This is horrifying, and it makes the relationship exceptionally special. But that's the problem, because it conflicts with every other feeling the series has been working to develop. Once we start to see just how special both of these characters are, the series only gets worse. When the mystery of Tags and Twilights came to light, I found myself caring less and less, because everything was way too special. Maybe it's just because I came into it with a vibe of more Black Lagoon, but this ruined the anime for me. It starts with a prostitute being beaten and two ruthless men killing her abuser for some kicks and money. This world was terrible from the very start in ways that didn't need heavy expositional dumps and half-answered questions. But then it stops being about real people with real problems and turns into a half-assed story tackling oppression. This is a problem just as real as any other, but one that was shoved in without the necessary tact. It feels like a cheap way to make certain characters more special. Nico doesn't gain any depth from the oppression. He already had reasons to be an outcast. It just makes an already shitty world even shittier in shallow ways. And it's the same for everyone. The laws and riots are just an excuse for them to have a dark connection to some shady event, to have bonds that can't be broken no matter what, to have trauma without developing it in any meaningful way. And when you're simultaneously making those characters pointless as well, it starts to feel off. Why are they so special that their backstory is the driving mystery of half the anime, but then they can disappear for an entire episode? Nico and Worick go from being nobodies to a specific story so big it's still talked about 20 years later to just being nobodies again. And then their kind of connection isn't even unique to them as we start to witness other characters who have just as much love despite everything. Like Loretta. Her only development is that her father was nice, so she is too, and that's all from the past that we don't see. That's why I say the shift to a story about oppression is cheap. It makes her a bit more special, but doesn't actually add anything that wasn't already there. She could have been helping people in general because the city is harsh, and her contribution to the plot wouldn't have changed at all. And this problem of Speciality runs much deeper. From their very introduction, the main pair was going to be much less impactful than the Lagoon crew. I mean, look at them. Seriously. Fuck, how much does this cost? I don't know anyone who looks like this, let alone has a story like theirs. I know people who look like Rock. I can relate my own story of pointlessness to his. That never happened with anyone in GANGSTA, because they became too entrenched in personal mystery. It wasn't about how they moved forward, it was about how the past came to greet them. And it sucks because the opportunity was there. This is a lesson in the necessity of backstory. Sometimes you just don't need it. When a character is a nobody, I think it presents much more opportunity for the audience to actually be close to them. I think with a lot of characters who are overly special, like Nico and Worick become, it's more of a relation to their personalities or to their oddities rather than their actual situation or any depth to their character. Nico is very unexpressive, but actually deep down kind of a goof, and I feel that. Worick covers all of his true feelings with cheap and shallow jokes, and I feel that as well. But those surface level personality traits, things which do not influence the plot or the story in any way, are where my relation to these characters ends. And I do want to take a second to acknowledge the fact that maybe I don't relate to these characters because my trauma is pretty much devoid of the physical realm. It's mostly in the mental and emotional areas where they have these very physically traumatic, abusive experiences, and maybe that's why I don't relate to them, but even if I did, they still have so much that's just unrelatable and exceptionally unrealistically special about them. Worick was a rich boy with personal guards. He can somehow memorize entire books in like 12 seconds. He remembers everything he ever sees, and to add on top of that, he's also the most physically attractive specimen of all time. It's not just that he's personally unrelatable to me, it's that I have never met or seen any hint of a person who exists that is anything like this. I think Nico actually does have a little bit more depth to him simply because he can't express himself to the level that Worick does, where there is this idea that he's kind of rushing headfirst into these dangerous situations because he might really just want to be done with life, but can't because of Worick. But that is also another underdone element, and because it ties in with Twilights and Tags, which were introduced a little bit later and very underdeveloped for the series, and again, something very special and unique, it weakens one of the only real elements they actually had going into their characters. It's almost frustrating. Like, I really want to relate to these two, but they make it so hard to do. And I could say a lot of the same things for Alex as well. Her story started off very real and gritty and sadly relatable to probably more people than it should be. But then they took it again in a very specific, very specialized way. Not taking it completely out of reality, but definitely putting it a lot further for most people. And in the end, all I really see are a bunch of mega attractive, mega unrealistically skilled, super out of the ordinary people, and that's just hard to relate to. I relate with Rock in respect to the ways that he actively changes the story, for why he chose to leave his comfortable life behind for some semblance of purpose no matter how shitty a life it was, for why he feuds with Revy and her forceful ideals. Because I don't know exactly why he believes those things, it's open to me to interpret that from his actions and to watch him grow into someone who feels those things, and it makes him and the entire cast one of the most well-developed in all of everything. I was gonna say anime, but let's just say everything. Fucking hell, I researched the Soviet-Afghan War to understand more of Balalaika and Colombia's history for more of Roberta, but it wasn't essential for either one, it just added more to them. Every character in Black Lagoon is who we're introduced to, and they get more depth from there. There's no big reveal that Rock has actually been mad the whole time, because we watched that shit happen. The more I learned about Worick and Nico, the less I actually cared for them because they weren't getting any depth, they were getting character-changing details that simplified rather than expanded. All of their actions have a simple reason that got told to us in bits and pieces rather than being developed in their actions. Worick isn't nice because of something we see him develop into, even though he does change throughout the series. He only changes because we learn from his past that his father was shitty, so that makes him want to be nice. That's not development, that's just a shitty reveal. And that's a good point, because as that mystery around them became more and more defined, they just drifted further and further away. Now, despite being similarly compared to Black Lagoon, I could also use Jormungand as an example in some of these cases. I'd actually say it's closer to GANGSTA than Black Lagoon, but one thing saves it: Coco. Because they understood the importance of leaving a backstory open. We just know she was raised to do this from a young age. We assume that her father is a piece of work with no love to give. We assume that she saw so many similar people in this work and came to hate them all, and we also see those things with her. Because her father isn't there, and because we never even hear him speak or anything like that, we know he was absent and just raised her to make himself more money. We see the other terrible arms dealers in this show, and they have very little development, but they have a purpose, and that's showing how shitty arms dealers are. That's the power of leaving your character open to the audience and showing us why they are who they are, not revealing it to us. That element is so powerful, it was able to save an entire anime because it made one exceptionally strong character. Like, I don't actually like Jormungand, I just love Coco. And I respect that to no end when it's done well, because it's tough to leave your character's story open. I'm finally starting to write down my own stories in some real detail, and it's hard not to make them feel all as real and specific as myself. because they're an extension of me, and as a part of me that people might see, I want them to be real. But sometimes trying to make them real in grand, overt ways only alienates them from the audience. And when your characters feel distant, your entire story will. Anyway, you might have been able to tell that this went slightly off the rails. This was supposed to be a video on GANGSTA, but it turned more into a gushing over Black Lagoon. And there's good reason for that. It's easy to write about Black Lagoon. It springs forward from an amazing anime full of depth. GANGSTA is a drag to try and write about because it felt like everything was right there on the surface. Someone was just holding a cheap tablecloth in front of it and their arms slowly got tired. I had nothing to add that wasn't technical. I didn't do more than mention Alex because, well, she was just there. They did her just as dirty with development. They dropped her brother into the story halfway through and called it a day instead of deepening the real trauma she was dealing with. She was just there for something to ogle most of the time, like the entire intro sequence. Another reason to love Coco and Revy and Balalaika and more, because they're actually strong female characters who get shit done and steal the show. We need more of those in anime. A lot more. With anime like GANGSTA, there's no point in burning myself out to make something from nothing. So yeah, GANGSTA wasn't for me at all. I don't think it should be compared to Black Lagoon without heavy caveats. Similarly, Jormungand has a necessity for that as well, just to a lesser extent. So if you have something that has the depth of Black Lagoon, let me know down below. I don't care about the guns or the guts or the breasts, which was probably made clear by the Worick comments. I just want that feeling of failure and pointlessness from survival, or something as well developed as that from a different theme, something similarly dark. And I know a lot of you do too, so suggest a way down below. Anyway, as I started this ending ramble with, this was a wild video that went off the rails. It was very vintage prof. I kind of wrote this one like I did my first few anime discussion videos where we talked about Esdeath and Elfenlied, and I think Tokyo Ghoul, one of my first videos on it was one of those as well. So it was very much in that style where I just kind of sat down and wrote things, and what came out seemed to work well enough, and there just wasn't much to add to GANGSTA, so I ended up talking about Black Lagoon. I don't know, it's something. This video is already so long, so I don't even want to waste your time, but important links below. I will have my Twitter down there where, new video announcements, random different things on there. My Discord where we hang out, chat about anime, different things, second link down there, or I don't know what order the links are in. There's a subscribe one as well, which I hope you'll do for more anime content that is a little bit better than this, I swear. You can also find my Patreon down below where you can be like the amazing people on screen right now who are helping me to grow the channel into something better, and more videos on screen as well. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.